Hi, Jarvis. How are you?
Excellent.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit today about what it means to be a visionary strategist. You pride yourself a lot on being a visionary strategist. So just tell me what that means.
For me, it means being able to see things, whether that be uh, situations or how to resolve a problem or I should say, future potential problem or challenge. And so, and when I look at a visionary strategist, for me, it involves a combination of a few different moving parts. One, it's under being able to see the landscape, if you will, from let's say 100,000 feet. Secondly, being able to drop down to ground level and see the different moving parts. In the analogy I gave, the trees, actually being able to see the specific trees. And this is looking ahead, being able to see from 100,000 feet, then dropping down, seeing the trees, and knowing how they all interrelate to each other. Say the trees, uh, the pond, the walking trail, how they all relate to each other, come together. And in the context of trying to go from point A to Z, like I said, being able to see the moving parts, knowing how they fit together, knowing how to move those pieces, if you want, on a chessboard to get to point Z. It entails that that sounds maybe simplistic or overly confusing, but it's a lot of moving parts to be able to put it all together is what it takes to be a successful visionary strategist. And
For
I can
sure.
break that further if you like.
Yeah. Well, tell me why it's important to have one of those on your team.
Uh, well, because what happens oftentimes in an organization is someone comes up with a great idea, and let's assume it's a great idea. There's a huge difference between having a great idea and being successful in having that idea manifest itself in as a product or service. So many people, of course, have bad ideas, but let's put that aside. Many people have good ideas, but the ability to understand the dynamics and the challenge required to make that, let's say, great idea or good idea manifest itself is require. If you have someone who's has as a visionary strategist, if you will, then that will help bring that to fruition. And I think a good starting place. What is to be a visionary? You have some people are visionary. You have some people are strategists. Uh, but they're two different things. But to have someone a visionary strategist is someone who's able to see down the road, let's say a point Z, and know how to strategize to get there. And that's an important distinction. Those are important distinctions because a visionary sometimes is just someone who sees point Z, but you try to ask them to get how do you go and get there. They're more in their head. Some people would say, the very big picture, but how to get to point Z, they have no idea. And then you have many people who are strategists, but they only are strategists to the extent that they're looking at something immediately in front of them or something maybe a month, 2 months, possibly even a year out. So a visionary strategist is someone, again, who's able to look far down the road and then after seeing, let's say, point Z, they're able to strategize to get there, taking into considerations the different challenges, resources, financial requirements, etc., that an organization needs.
Right. So you mentioned that a visionary is someone who might see a really, really great picture, but not quite know how to get there. So, if you had a person like that on your team who's a visionary, how would you get them to develop that strategist part?
Well, I don't. I have to tell you honestly. You hear a lot of people will say someone's an idea person,
Hmm.
a visionary. Let's say he's a visionary. He's an idea person. When you look at people like Bill Gates and Apple, Steve Jobs, they were definitely visionary strategists. I don't remotely, even when I'm sleeping, pretend that I'm in the same category as them. What I am saying, though, is they definitely were visionary strategists. When you look at Steve Jobs, he took a idea for the personal computer, and that's a vision. Before it may sound a course now, but it wasn't a course when he had that idea, and he was able strategically to implement it. That's a visionary strategy. Most people, by far, are either or. They're visionary or strategists. So to answer your question, I'm sure there's many, many exceptions. Usually, either you're a visionary or a strategist or a visionary strategist. To teach someone who's is an idea person, a lot of times they don't want to be a strategist. They'll tell you, I'm an idea man or woman. I come up with these brilliant, great ideas. Let's assume they are brilliant, great, and I can hire people to get me there. Sometimes CEOs are idea persons or visionary, but they're not the best strategists. Sometimes strategists, I mean, you can have a lot of people who can do strategic planning, but usually they're taking the fixed resources or fixed tangible things around them in an organization, figuring out how to make them work as they go forward. But they're not necessarily, a strategist isn't necessarily can see a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road. So to teach a visionary to be a strategist or a strategist to be a visionary, maybe it's possible. I don't know how to do it. Instead, I believe if you're smart and you're in a management position, depending on the organization, many organizations don't want a visionary because they've been around and they have their way of doing things. And they ain't doing things that much different. I mean, they're making change. They would maybe tell the public or their shareholders, whatever. But many insurance companies, they have a way of doing business. Yes, they change their products and they go in new directions, but they have their way of doing things. And most companies don't need a strategist, someone to figure out how to get from point A to B, not necessarily from point A to Z. Uh, Z, but from point A to B, meaning your year-end results. How are you going to achieve your year-end results? We need a strategist for that. So it's short-term, long-term strategy. So I hope I'm answering your question, but it's not these are core skill sets, I believe, that we're talking about.
No, you answered my question beautifully. And that was my last one. So thank you so much for your time today.